Hey, this is Andy Jenkins, and welcome back to the podcast. This week, I'm doing, it's one of those in the Coaches series where I endeavor to bring an expert from I really try to go to the 7 key areas of life. So let me walk with you through them real quick. Fitness, finance, family, faith, field, which would be your career or whatever you do full-time with your time, and then friends and fun. And so really one of the arguments that we have is those are all important areas, and you want to be balancing and growing in each of those. Think of those areas like a wheel, and each of those areas is a spoke of that wheel. Now, if one goes down a little bit, not a big deal, but if you lose one, the wheel will still roll. You lose 2, you might actually just flat and stop making progress altogether. So you think of it in terms of just some of the real world stuff we experience. A lot of people give themselves completely to their field, completely to their work at the expense of family, and then progress just halts. Or you've got great ideas that'll change the world, but then you let your health go. You can't change the world if you're sick on the couch. So each of these 7 areas, they're all important. Now, this one, I'm trying to figure out if I put this in the Coaches series or I attach this to the Soul Wholeness series, because this one is hyper important, and maybe we'll resolve it by the end of it. I've got my friend here, Ingrid Cook. She is married to one of my favorite people on the entire planet and is mom to several of my, those are my goddaughters, right?
Yeah,
and godsons. And so she's really connected in this incredible way to kind of the Jenkins household here. And she became, through a story that we're going to talk about, a coach to help people overcome addiction. Okay, so welcome, Ingrid. Thanks for coming into. We're in the tiny house downstairs.
This is awesome.
So when you say like you're an addiction coach, instantly people go to the world of rehab.
Right.
And they think of somebody that's an addict as somebody that's shooting up a needle,
right,
as someone that's on the street. That is, from my experience in addiction, that's kind of one stereotype. Mm-hmm. But let's talk through, because
it is.
Nobody would look at you and ever think, oh, she never struggled with anything.
Oh, I've done lots of market research.
Well, I know you bet you have.
That's how we come this way. And so, first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me here, because this message has been brewing in me for most of my life, and I really didn't even know it was brewing, but I brought something to show you, Andy, that this is my first grown-up, real fancy kind of Bible that my friend Julie Pruitt gave to me around 1990. Look what I wrote in here. That was around 1991, I think.
You wrote this to yourself.
It was a booming voice that I heard in the night that I am saying this was God's voice to me.
Yeah.
And he said, I love you and want you to be free. And I didn't really know what that meant exactly then. I was just like, wow, this is cool. And it was just such an insistent voice that I said, I'm taking out a Sharpie.
I'm going to take a picture of that. I'm going
to put that
on the notes, the show notes here.
I'm taking a Sharpie and I'm using my best handwriting to write it in this Bible. I didn't grow up knowing about Jesus and all of that. And so this was still really new to me. And that was a very unusual voice that I heard, and I knew it was significant. And now it's all coming to play. Now I'm understanding it. And so let's see, you say addiction coach. It's not really addiction, it's more habit. Okay? So I'm not really working with people who need medical attention for their any physical kind of...
Yeah, that's probably a good word, because if you need medical attention,
I'm not the one to go to.
You need to go to the doctor.
I am a doctor of chiropractic, but that's not in my scope of practice. So I am clearly, we're not that. It's more for habit. And the people that I want to reach are people like me who think, oh no, this alcohol, it's just frustrating. I just keep wanting to have a drink, and it's getting to be a problem. So you're focusing on alcohol. I'm focusing on alcohol right now, and that might expand, but the tools and strategies that I've learned can be applied to any habit, really, because a lot of it is focusing on your positive emotion. And there's been so much science-based research done that people change by emotion. That's a massive factor there.
I've heard that that's true, and then they tend to logically back up what they've already emotionally decided. Is that accurate? Or,
Explain what you're saying.
People make decisions based on emotion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They change based on emotion.
Oh, yeah. And then they'll justify it afterwards.
For good or bad.
Right.
And then
right.
afterwards, even I could think, it's not always a negative. Like, I can look back at times in my life where I've made positive changes, and they were initially sparked by emotion.
Totally.
And
that's how people buy things. Like, you want to go and buy a new car. You'll first fall in love with the car, and then be like, okay, well, it does have good financing. So, you're not
it'll
going...
be cheaper to do this than repairing the old one.
Even
though it's
you start
not.
Convincing yourself of all the reasons why, but your first action is because you fell in love with the car, and you're making your decision based on emotion.
Based on the emotion.
So emotions drive our behaviors. That's a really important fact that has been scientifically proven over and over again. I really like some of the work by B.J. Fogg. He's a professor at Stanford University, and he's a lot of fun to read. He has a book called Tiny Habits, and he just says, we change because we want to feel good. We change better by feeling good than feeling bad. So the program that I like to work with people, it's totally based on self-compassion, and it's grace-led. It's encouraging. It is not a shame-based kind of a thing, like, oh, you loser, you failed again.
Right.
It's because that is not going to compel anybody to change. And
it may for a little bit, and then the moment, but long term it can't.
Exactly. That kind of change is solely willpower based, and that will not last. And that has been scientifically proven over and over and over again. It's okay in the short term, but long term change will not survive when it's willpower based. Not in a happy sense anyway. You'll always be left with a sense of deprivation and fear of missing out, or and pity party stuff. Like, oh, I wish I could drink like a normal person. Why can't I do it? And well, I can't, so I won't. And on goes another day, and that just sounds awful to me.
Yeah.
That's an imprisonment. And like I said in the very beginning, I wanted freedom. And I was definitely drinking more than I intended to, more than I wanted to. But I was so frustrated because I didn't know what to do about it. And I didn't consider myself an alcoholic. I didn't consider myself a hardcore addict or something like that. I didn't know where to turn, and nobody really wants to talk about it. Just the subject itself is so shameful to even talk about. And we don't know anything about it. There's a sad lack of knowledge about what alcohol actually does to your body. We know more about what Advil does to you than alcohol does to you on a general public scale.
So you're right. We don't talk about it. I mean, there are certain things that it seems odd that even churches don't talk about.
Right.
Because you think that would be the place where you could kind of dump your junk, right? Even if it wasn't messy at the time,
right?
It might just be like, hey, this may be going too far, or I'm struggling.
My wheel's going out of balance. This area of my life is starting to.
You really can't open up with any of that. So I want to come back to what alcohol does to your body.
Okay, that's fine.
Because last year during COVID, I gained 20 pounds. And I was looking back to see what changed in my habits. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that changed was I quit doing cardio workout because I was building the tiny house. Okay. And it was just because I was getting up early and doing
some cardio
it. So,
right there.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I felt like I was exercising, and I was. The other habit that changed was I started drinking bourbon. Now, I didn't start drinking bourbon during COVID, but I started drinking a lot more of it.
More of it, yeah.
And I was mixing it with Dr. Pepper. I never drink sodas, but mixing it with... I was drinking about 2 cans of soda a day with the bourbon.
Right.
So that I know soda is the equivalent of a candy bar. So I know I gained weight. I mean, 20 pounds, you do a half a pound a week over a year.
And the dark substances have more other things in them. They have more tannins in them and other things in them. It's not as pure as like a clear kind of a substance.
Like a vodka.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to come because
and then
so
a
I gained
Sprite
weight
versus a Dr. Pepper. So.
Okay, so now I'm losing that. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I'm back to where I was now, pretty much. But I would be interested to know, okay, what else was going on, and let me see just personally firsthand. But first, before we go to that, I want to know, like, how did you get into this? When does the light bulb go off and go, all right?
This is
because I've known you for a few years and wouldn't go, oh, she's struggling.
Oh my gosh, there were so many times when we went to your church and I had a terrible hangover.
But you should be able to, like, you should be able to go to church with a hangover.
Yeah, I sat in the back and yep, that's right. Well, so the household I grew up in, alcohol was just kind of always there. My parents drank and everything. Holidays, definitely. You know, we had the endless cocktail hour, and then, you know, dinner might happen. I didn't think anything of it. I mean, I was thinking of some of those early experiences before I came over here today, and I was like, oh my gosh, I remember I think it was 3rd grade at a school function going up to, and this was a private school up in Massachusetts, and they had a full bar. This is back in the 70s, you know, and I just went up there and said, can I have a bourbon and soda for my mom? And they're like, no. I'm pretty sure I was in 3rd grade. And I was like, okay, well.
3rd grade.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought nothing of it. I was like, well, that's inconvenient. She's over there talking. Do I really have to interrupt her to come over here? And they're like, yes, I can't give you a bourbon and soda. I'm like, all right, fine. And then,
but you were that casually around it is what you're getting at.
Yeah. That's just what they drank. And then we traveled to Denmark often. And I don't know back then, you know, in the 70s, if airplanes had those little bottles or if they charged you for it or something. My dad, I'm sure, wouldn't want to pay for a little bottle. But so my parents had, back then there was a gas station called Mobil. I think Exxon bought it.
I remember it.
You remember Mobil?
Yes.
Okay. So they had this little opaque white bottle, a squirt bottle. I think it was probably a half quart for oil, motor oil. And that was their bourbon flask.
Was the motor oil...
The bottle. Yeah,
okay.
They washed it out, of course. But so I remember on the plane, you know, they would just order the club soda and then here's your Mobil oil.
Oh,
and
wow.
I got a kick out of it. I thought it was hilarious. I thought they were so cool that they had their Mobil oil. And
yeah.
People look at them kind of funny, but, you know, it might have been my dad trying to save a few pennies, but... Anyway.
But it was but you guys were casually around this is what you were getting at. Like, this wasn't a big...
They were totally functional and everything.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't go without. My dad was an engineer, had a successful business, all of that kind of stuff. My mom didn't work outside the home, but you know, it was...
But he liked his alcohol.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I remember the first time I ever tasted Jim Beam, and I was maybe 12. I don't know exactly, but
young.
I was pretty young, I guess. I was just curious about it. It was awful. I spit it out all over the wall. And that's actually a pretty important point, because we're not born with a taste for alcohol. It's an acquired taste.
Well, that's what everybody says. Like, oh, you don't like beer now, or, you know.
You'll like it. Just keep drinking it, and you'll eventually like it. Yeah.
You have to acquire it.
Yeah, but we are not born with that. And I remember one day my dad, I was never able to drink Miller Lite because I was a kid, and he pulled out this can that was under the car seat in the summer, you know, so it's summer car hot can of
and it's Miller Lite. That's not Lost.
And he opened it up and took a big giant swig and said, ah, and I was like, I was ready to just hurl, right? Yeah. I was like, that's disgusting. So, and then his favorite thing would be to microwave it and mix it with clamato juice.
What?
So, you know, I didn't grow up like, I was like, it's amazing I ever even decided to try it in the first place. But yeah, we are not born with a taste for alcohol. And some people will say, oh, well, I give a little nip into the baby's bottle and it helps him sleep. But yeah, I don't know what's going on with that scenario. But, you know, if anybody can think back to the time that they ever tasted something, they most likely didn't like it. And then later on, we changed that thought pattern. We
well, it's like
changed that
cigarettes
belief.
too. Nobody just picks up a cigarette and is like,
Right.
"Oh, that's the best thing I've ever."
Right.
I interrupted you. Sorry, I just made that connection while you were.
Exactly.
All these things
Yeah.
that are unhealthy.
Yeah.
We don't tend to have this affinity for them naturally.
Right.
Okay, so
And Brussels sprouts, I guess we kind of grow that. I don't know. Our taste buds do change, but what happens in the work that I do, we really look at what's going on in your mind and your thoughts and your beliefs about things.
yeah,
And questioning. There's a lot of curiosity involved and questioning and just like, that's funny. I always thought alcohol tasted really good. I thought, a nice glass of red wine or white wine or whatever. I thought I liked that taste, but is it true? Could it be true that that's just kind of a lie I've told myself, that I didn't really start out that way. And that was one of the beliefs that was one of the last ones to go for me. But with This Naked Mind, that's the program that I got certified with, that's what we do. We question beliefs about alcohol, especially. Like, a lot of people believe it relaxes them. Well, is that really true? And actually, if you go to look at the science of things, alcohol does not relax you. It totally screws up your sleep patterns. It leaves you with higher adrenaline and cortisol levels during the day, even when you're not drinking, just, every day. So it leaves you with higher anxiety levels, and then people think that if they have a drink, it'll calm down their anxiety levels,
so
but actually it's just feeding the beast.
So you end up, drinking more.
You're right. You end up drinking more. And the thing is, it creates its own vacuum. It creates its own desire.
So when did it wake up for you? So you had this experience when you were growing up. It's very
so then
just commonplace.
I learned to party and learned to like beer and all of that stuff. Those are all learned behaviors. So if they're learned, we can unlearn them.
I think that's important for people to grab
onto.
It
is, yeah, because it's not a hopeless situation. I mean, if I could change this, I am not a good rule follower, and I don't consider myself a super disciplined person. And so if somebody is to tell me you can't drink, I'm like, fire alarms go off.
Yeah.
So I don't like to hear that. It's a different story if I choose not to drink. And so, let's see, I was going to say something. I just lost that train of thought.
So you were we were talking about your story. Like, when did it click to you? Where you're like, it's so commonplace, you get into it. When does it shift and think, man, I've got to do something about this?
Yeah, it crept up on me for sure. And we had a transition period in life, and there were all of a sudden like a lot more people hanging around the house and everything. And by nature, I'd say I'm more of an introverted than an extroverted person.
And you got into the Cook family, which
is, say that,
I mean, I've already said it, that's like a loud, outgoing, fun group of people.
They are. I love them to death. And they multiply. They have a lot of friends that come over. We were living in
multiply.
Grand Central Station. And, I mean, Brad and I, we were amazing drinking buddies. We had a lot of fun together, but I think it might have been around that time, and these two things might have happened just coincidental or, simultaneously. Yeah. Both, I was getting older, and for older women especially, alcohol tends to have, it just creeps up on you. It just gets to be kind of a crutch for you. And more so for women than for men. So I was getting older, and then I jumped into Grand Central Station. And so that's when I think alcohol really I started drinking more for stress relief or more for escape type things than just to, more casual reasons.
Yeah.
And it's when it goes down to a deeper level like that's when it starts to really grab hold of your mind and take over. And you get like the little voice in your head. We all have voices running along in our head and everything. But, when it's a repetitive voice and telling you, oh, go have a drink. Oh, a drink would make this trip to the zoo better. Oh, a drink would make this meal better. Oh, drink would make this movie better, then,
Yeah.
That's when when it's repetitive like that, it's not a good voice.
Well, okay, so let me clarify there. By Grand Central Station, I don't mean this was a party house. This is just...
No.
Well, just so people know, like, this is not a house where there's, like,
not
just
a flop house
everybody's drinking. This is just a house.
No, it was just a lot of people.
You married into a family that's just doesn't meet strangers. Everybody hangs out. The
last name is Cook. They love to cook for people, and it was not a party house. But to me, as an introvert, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And I needed to recharge, and because that's introverts, we like people, but just not all the time, not all the time, and not with all of their friends too. And Brad would just make 10 chickens at a time. He's like, someone's gonna eat it. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. So getting older, life situations. And that's an easy crutch. Like it's the perfect storm of just
exactly
drinking alcohol all the time.
It was easy
instead of, and it's an acceptable thing. Really, it's not. There's certain habits that are not acceptable.
Right.
But this one is kind of one that's mainstreamed. And it's easy.
Massively accepted. It's so widespread.
And encouraged.
It is. It is.
Hey, y'all come over. We'll have a drink.
And, I mean, look at, cocaine. That's not acceptable. I'd never let somebody start doing cocaine in front of my family or my child or something like that, But if they were going to have a glass of wine and even get tipsy in front of my child, that just kind of happens. Barely a day goes by that we don't see or hear of somebody drinking, And it's there's so much marketing, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole that we can.
So when does the line get for you to where you go, hey, I'm doing something? Jumped.
It was, my son was about 10, and he was starting to be like, Mom, you smell bad, and he didn't like it. He and I have a really close connection. He could tell that it changed me somehow. And he didn't think my jokes were so funny. I thought I was hilarious, but he didn't agree with that. And so it was really for him that I was like, okay, I don't want to be that parent. I want to be present with him. I don't want to miss out on his childhood because of this stupid alcohol, because of wine or something, even though I thought I was having a pretty darn good time.
Yeah.
If it weren't for him, I don't know that I would have stopped. But so initially it was really for him. And then as I started getting into it and doing the work and everything, I realized, oh my gosh, it's all lies. It's all empty promises. It doesn't fulfill the promises that the marketing people tell us it will. It didn't give me that gorgeous body on the beach and, those great legs and all that stuff. And, my makeup didn't quite look like the girls in the magazine pages and everything. But so once I started realizing that and realizing my own freedom from it, then now it's full on for me. It's, I have absolutely no desire for it anymore. And that's the key thing, is that the desire is gone. So now I have no temptation whatsoever. So you could have the bottle of my favorite Sauvignon Blanc right here in front of us, and I'd be like, nah, I don't even want it.
So not even any casual drinking.
I don't care if people are drinking around me. Actually,
it doesn't offend you. It's just...
Actually, I feel sorry for them because I feel like there's a message that they would benefit from learning. There's so much misinformation, and people are so duped by it, and I feel sorry for them.
Okay, so tell us, what does alcohol do to the body or to the mind? I mean, take that any way you want to it. What are people missing?
They're missing that they can have freedom from it. They can really analyze their own thoughts. It all comes from their thoughts. That's where all our behavior comes from. And questioning, does it really do what I think it does? I think it relaxes me. I think it reduces my anxiety. I think it makes me sleep better. I think it makes me funnier. I think it makes sex better. I think anything. Question those things. And does it really do that all the time, 100% of the time? Or sometimes are you not really quite as funny as you think you are?
Yeah.
if there's any room for doubt in there, then there's room for doubt in there, you know? And I've just found that by doing all that mind work, it has given me like fearless confidence that I have never had before.
So imagine when you beat this, it does unlock other areas, because you start, when you do the mind work and ask questions about this, you inevitably ask questions about other things, right? And when you grow in this area,
it's taught me to trust myself.
Okay.
It's taught me that I make good decisions.
Tell me about that.
It's taught me I can be happy just walking down the street and looking up at the clouds. I mean, while I was driving here, I was looking, we had some beautiful puffy cumulus clouds today, and I was just like, that just makes me feel so small in this whole big world, but still so significant and so appreciative of just nature around us. And it's just so centering and grounding. And I mean, it's just amazing. And a glass of wine can't do that for you.
So is it maybe, we're numbing out of something, and we numb out, we're missing.
You numb all your feelings. You can't selectively numb. That's a really important fact right there too. When you are numbing anything, you're numbing everything. And yeah, there is pain in life, but you're better off to feel it, address it. That's when you can decide, is there something I can do about this? Or is there not something I can do about this? Do I need, with whatever pain, a death of somebody or an accident, an economic crisis, how about a pandemic,
Right. Well, I mean, they said that was one of the big things that was up last year was
alcohol.
Yeah,
people trying to escape.
Yeah, people.
But the thing is, when you can escape from that, you can escape from boredom, but you know what? Boredom also triggers your mind to try to think of something new to do. Boredom stimulates your creativity because you're tired of being bored,
Yeah.
So you're trying to think, well, what can I do with this? I mean, what can I do with this little stick? Or what can I do in this mud puddle? It's like, it's not that instant gratification that we get now with video games and stuff like that. But, a kid 20 years ago could totally entertain himself for a week with a wooden spoon and a flower pot.
I mean, I think that's the thing we've missed at culture is when I was little, we did not have phones on us.
Right.
We had video games, but we just didn't play them that often.
You had to go out of your way to play them.
It was not, there was no online anything.
Right. And it wasn't the high hit of dopamine stimulation that the video games now give you. And dopamine it's a transmitter in your brain, and people think of that as the addiction hormone, but it's really not. It's more of wanting and liking, and just it stimulates pleasure centers in your brain. And when you get a hit of dopamine, like a text message ding or something, it's hard to resist checking your phone. What's that ding? Something important,
or something
notification or when you get those things, it's hard to resist. And that's where physically a lot of those habits can be formed. And what's interesting is those pleasure centers don't get that level of stimulation from natural sources. It has to be an artificial stimulation to create like an addiction. It like with sex, intimate love with your partner is one thing. Pornography is a whole nother thing. That's a whole nother realm that stimulates the dopamine different. A little wooden child's gun is one thing, but machine gun with first person shooter games where you're doing all this stuff, that's much more stimulating. Yeah. And a bowl of raspberries is one thing, but something with all the high fructose corn syrup in it and high sugar content, that's a whole nother kind of thing that then creates sugar addictions. And it's interesting to learn about all the brain chemistry and stuff. I tend to get into all that, but I do see eyes glaze over when I want to go down that road.
But the thing you guys are doing are science backed, though. It's even if people... I mean, it's like getting in an airplane. You don't have to, if you're riding in the plane, understand how aerodynamics works.
True.
But you can still enjoy the flight and benefit. Same thing when somebody comes to you for this help. They don't have to understand the science, but they will benefit from the science
that
propels the vehicle.
You said that just perfectly, Andrew. That was perfect.
Awesome. So okay,
yeah.
so you get on this journey, you get certification to help people.
Yeah.
So how does somebody find you, and then what does that whole thing look like?
Okay.
So if I say, okay, I've got to kick this habit. I've been drinking.
I'm curious if life can be good without it.
Yeah.
You know, it's my website is being constructed right now. It's going to be really awesome. I'm so excited about it. But for right now, they can email me at.
Okay. I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. It's Ingrid at dringridcook.com.
Is that going to be the domain for the website?
It is, yeah.
Okay,
Dr.
so that'll be
Ingrid
easy.
Cook.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
All right. And so they reach out to you, and then what's the path that they decide they want to work with you? What does that initially look like?
I like to do group sessions in a 3-month time period. I also do the one-on-one coaching. I like to do it on Zoom, but if somebody doesn't want their face or, you know, I respect their privacy. I'm ready to work how they want to work, but I like using a program that was produced by This Naked Mind, and it's a 3-month program, and people will get a video each day and a written format, and then also journal prompts, and then with the group we'll meet once a week as a group, and there's something magical that happens with that community aspect of being in a group and participating with a group. And, you know, and we would have like our own little group where they can communicate with each other and stuff, probably on Facebook. And they will also have access to me directly through a really cool app called Voxer. It's like a walkie-talkie app.
Yeah.
And so they can leave me messages, and it's separate from text messaging and all of that stuff, and then I can respond to them. And then I also want to have one-on-one calls with them at least once a month. So, yeah, so I'm running those groups, and I'm doing those every 3 months. I keep the limit to 10 people per group.
What's the benefit of like group therapy for the person?
They get to hear about other people's experiences, because really we all have so much more in common than we think we do. And I know this was true for me too. I felt very alone in this journey, and I didn't feel I had anybody to talk to. I didn't think anybody else understood what I was going through, and I didn't want to have to go to a therapist or something, because that meant something was wrong with me. But really, when you ingest an addictive substance, guess what happens? It messes with your mind. You know, it's very predictable. And so anybody really is on that downward slope. You know, you never hear of somebody drinking less as they get older. You know, even you said you started drinking more bourbon. You know, it's like, take college experiences aside for a minute, but you know, it's like,
well, that's kind of an anomaly.
That's a whole different thing. But people just tend to drink more and more and more, and it might not be a drastic increase, but it's very slow. You know, for me anyway, it was a slow, insidious thing that I was like, oh my gosh, now all of a sudden it's like hard to not drink for a day, and what's wrong with me? It was scary. I was scared, like, am I becoming an alcoholic? Is that what's going on? And it was really pretty scary, and it was frustrating because I didn't want to drink. I wanted to not drink, but then 5 o'clock would come, and that little wine witch voice would take over, and before I knew it, there I have a glass in my hand, you know, and that's what's called cognitive dissonance. You're doing something you don't want to do, and that's what, by exploring your subconscious mind, by exploring your beliefs and your thoughts that you're not aware of, you know, this is in the subconscious realm, but it's your subconscious mind that really runs the show. That's what drives your behavior.
It drives a lot.
It drives a lot, yeah. And it's driven largely by pleasure. We want to run away from pain and towards pleasure, but those are some of the driving forces for it. But it runs the show. It's emotion driven. It's not logic driven. They are two separate parts of your brain, and they really don't communicate very well until you start digging in and exploring it and shedding light on what's going on. Then all of a sudden that subconscious mind loses its power. And so that's, like, for me, for example, I have zero temptation right now to have a drink. I won't say that I never will again, because I won't know until I'm dead if that was actually true or not. But what I can say for right now is I drink as much as I want to, whenever I want to. And it just happens to be that I don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if you put a bunch of cocaine on the table for me, I'm like, no thanks. Or I've never been a cigarette smoker. Want a cigarette? No, not for me. Thanks, but no.
Yeah, so it's the same.
It's similar, yeah.
What would be like a telltale sign that somebody needs to reach out and grab help? That
if they're drinking more than they want to, more than they intend to, or drinking when they didn't really plan on drinking. You know, I mean, a lot of people, I for one, certainly set all kinds of rules for myself. Okay, I'll have 2 glasses of wine, or I'll wait till Friday, or, you know, I'll have a glass of water in between glasses of wine or something. None of that worked.
So if you start moving the goalpost and setting all these middle
none of that worked. And then what it did was I would fail and fail and fail, and it was just, the more I failed, the more scared I got.
Okay, and that's the sign. Any of that.
No
shame.
No shame whatsoever.
Just reach out. Yeah.
No, go for freedom.
Yeah.
There's no shame in that whatsoever.
Well, I think, you know, there's this verse in the New Testament that I kind of land on a lot. It seems lately where in 1 John 1:7, he talks all about walking in the light. Mm-hmm. And we tend to hide that stuff.
Yeah.
But he says, no, when you walk out in the light, like that's when 2 big things happen. Number 1 is community happens.
Yeah.
Because he says you walk in the light. Then you have, the word he uses in the Bible is fellowship with one another. It's really connection with other people.
Connection, yeah.
So all of a sudden you're like, oh, golly, you too. Yeah, me too.
And realizing you're not alone.
I'm not,
I mean,
we're all hiding the same thing
and
because we're afraid nobody else has the same thing. But then you get it out there and everybody's like, oh,
so true.
Gosh, yeah, me too. Okay, so you get connection. And then also, that's when cleansing happens. That's what John says.
Absolutely.
You get it out, and it's...
That's so true.
Then you can move forward. And I think sometimes the stranglehold that this stuff, whether it's alcohol or any other habit that's a harmful habit, has on us, it exists in the secrecy of it, or just the secrecy with a few other drinking buddies or whoever buddies that are kind of trusted on the end. And I think that's why at the end of the book of James, he says, and this is kind of a tricky, misused Bible verse too, he says, confess your sins to one another that you may be healed. And the big thing is confess it to each other, not confess it to God. God's already forgiven it. It's when you open it up to each other that you're like, oh, it's like just like what John said. Oh, you too. Okay, golly. Now we can be healed because we got the skeleton out of the closet. And
exactly,
you get the skeleton out of the closet, you realize the skeleton's just bones. He doesn't have muscle, tendon, sinew, ligaments. He doesn't have any breath or life. It's just a bunch of bones. Now we can really deal with it.
Right. It's not controlling you anymore.
Yeah, it's scary when it's hidden.
Yeah, like a mouse and a screechy sound in the dark basement, you know, and then you realize it's just a little wind blowing on a vent or something. You picture this big monster thing. Yeah,
This has been super helpful, insightful for me. Anything else that you want to add before I close this out?
Well, when I work with people, I'm a very analytical kind of a person, and so I really want to make it work for the person. You know, I feel so strongly about this that if one person isn't hearing the message correctly one way, then we find another way. And so like journaling is amazing. That's really powerful. I have a hard time with journaling. It's just not my thing, but so that's where everybody kind of responds to a different way. But I have the structure of a program, and that's why I like to have those individual calls with people, because that's where they can really explore their own particulars of their life. But, you know, sharing it with the community is really huge, and not having that shame. It's not their fault. That's a big thing to accept, that getting addicted to an addictive substance is not your fault. That's what the stuff is designed for. That's what the
Right.
industry wants you to do because they make billions of dollars off of you drinking. They don't want you to not drink. They want you to drink,
Yeah.
and that's no blame to them because they're in business, so that's what they're trying to do. It's just what they're doing is rough. But it's not your fault, it's your responsibility. And that's a mantra that I've really grown to like.
Not your fault, your responsibility. That's a good place to end. So as I shut this one down, we do this the same way every single week. Just pray for the people that are listening.
Yeah.
And so my prayer for you this week is that the Lord would bless you, that He'd keep you, He'd be gracious and shine His face of favor upon you. May you remember the words that were spoken in the gospel, that it is for freedom that Christ set you free. Straight from the Apostle Paul, just echoing what he'd heard from the other apostles. Don't be bound by any yoke of slavery. That's it. Grace, peace. I'll see you again soon.